Welcome to a community update from the Department of Senior Affairs. I'm your host, Ed Nunez. And today's title of the show is Preparing Your Spouse and Family. The show topic that we're going to be discussing is building a support team now for your spouse or loved one after your death. And with us to discuss that is Beverly Bailey from Chamisa Financial. And Beverly, thanks for joining us. I think, I saw this in our catalog, the Department of Senior Affairs catalog. You came to North Valley Senior Center, I believe, about a month ago. And I thought to myself, this is something that seniors, it's a big, it's something they need to know.
It really is, Ed, because, when I first started working on this, it was a little over a year ago, a friend of mine asked me to write an article or a blog post about how to help a widow get back on her financial, steady on her feet after losing her husband. And I started writing down, just jotting down things, these are things you need to know. And after I'd gotten like 5 pages of just listing things, I realized that if you and your spouse have not done preparation in advance, the surviving spouse is going to be in a terrible, terrible position, because there is so much that goes on that you can't think of everything.
It's very true. I was thinking about when my father passed away, and thank God things were left in pretty decent shape for my mom. But you had something you wanted to read to get out of the way. You said real quick.
Oh yeah, I need to go through, make the lawyers happy here. My name is Beverly Bailey. I am a certified financial planner. I work for LPL Financial. And one of the things is the advice that I'm offering here is for general information only, and it's not intended to be tax or legal advice for any specific individual. So if anything you hear here, you wonder if it affects you, you need to talk your own tax or legal advisor. And the investment services and products that I offer are only available to residents of New Mexico, Illinois, and Nevada. And at least for another week, my office is located at 6020 Academy Northeast here in Albuquerque, and my phone's 505-856-9237. So we've made the lawyers happy.
Okay, which won't change after you
move. Won't
move
change, right.
Your phone number.
Phone number stays the same.
Let's jump right into it, Beverly, because you got some very important questions here that I know you want to get to. So how did number one, how did this topic become important to you?
Well, my dad was diagnosed with cancer back in 2003. And he died the following April. And we had several months to talk about things, because I knew that I would become primarily responsible. My mother wasn't going to deal with it. She never had. And thought we had everything really under control. And then a couple of months after my dad passed, my mom called from the neighbors because the phone had been disconnected. And in all the trying to get all the paperwork and everything done, I had not noticed that the phone bill was not on automatic payment from the bank. Fortunately, I called what was in Southwestern Bell, and they took care of it, no problem. They said, gee, we're sorry, we'll rehook her back up. But that's the kind of little thing that gets overlooked if you don't have a plan.
Right, and you mentioned that you're going to have someone to deal with the affairs, and I guess nobody would think. I think one of the things is that needs to be said, and I'm sure you've already thought this and it's been said, is when that happens, people are traumatized, shocked, stunned. Maybe they expect it in some cases, but even when somebody is terminally ill, you know what's going to happen when it happens. It's still stuns you.
Yeah, there's being prepared, and then there's really being prepared.
Right. So you're dealing with a lot of things.
Yeah.
So even a small thing, and it turns into big things because it's the phone, the gas, the annuities, the taxes. We'll get into all those things, but I remember when my father passed away, and like I said, thank God things are on my mother's power of attorney now. I'm the one holding managing her affairs. So all these things are so important. The information you're going to tell people here, because you're never prepared. My mom
never prepared. No.
My mom tells me that. I tell you these things. She says so you'll get ready, and I'm like, for what? How do you prepare for that, Mom?
You can't.
Anyway,
you really can't.
And I think this is some of the things you're going to tell people to make sure the affairs are in order. That way, when things happen, you're not so overwhelmed as I'm sure maybe your mother might have been.
Yeah, and she wasn't prepared. And the other thing is, we talk about this. We think about couples. We think mostly about couples. But even if you're single, like I am, you leave an estate that somebody's got to deal with. So, for example, my executor is not a family member because my family doesn't live here. But I don't want my executor to be overwhelmed and say ugly things about me because I didn't leave my affairs in order
Right.
for her.
And so important here, we're going to get to some more of this, and I think here's the second question, which is going to what you just said. Who belongs on the support team? Because there's going to be so many people that think that they do. They had a share in it. They, some of those are financial motives. I think we'd agree with that. But who belongs on that support team? Who should people think about having there?
Well, like I said, anybody leaves an estate, and the person who makes sure that the estate passes properly is the attorney. So that's the first person that really needs to be on somebody's team is an attorney, because they're going to make sure that the documents are set up properly, that you have a will or a living trust, you have a power of attorney, you have a health care power of attorney. And one thing, like you or your mom's power of attorney right now, that durable financial power of attorney ends when the moment she passes away. So that's when you become the executor of the will or her successor trustee. And one of the things that's changed in the last few years, I know a lot of people that have did these documents 10, 15 years ago, nothing's changed. Well, with the HIPAA laws and some of those things, your documents may need to be updated. Even though everything's still the same, but the legal language may need to be updated. So they might want to consult an attorney and say, is this really right if they haven't done anything?
Concerning the will, you mean?
In the will and in the trust. And, in New Mexico, I understand New Mexico does recognize just a self-written will. You just scribble it down on a piece of paper and have it witnessed that this is what you want to do. But that could still create problems in court if there's a family member who wants to protest.
Which happens
All the time. So having a properly written will make sure that things go the way you want them to do. Now, the other thing the attorney will help you about is not only getting all the paperwork lined up so that, okay, so you call up and, Mr. Jones, Jack passed away last night. What do I need to do, or what does my mom need to do? Well, they'll help settle the estate, because there may be things that require legal documents, like to change who owns the house or the process of selling the house. All those things that involve legal documents, the lawyer's going to be the one to make sure it gets done right.
And I think one of the things that you said, that's so important, because some people are going to say, well, they may think, well, let's try to do this. There's too much. There's just too much. There's insurances, tax annuities, all the things that you mentioned. That attorney, whoever it is, and someone that you have to trust, trusted, family friend, or that's an attorney, or someone that knows somebody. That's so important to put him and on the team first. Would you say?
Yes, I really would, because if you don't have the documents right up front that you've laid out and you've talked to your spouse about, this is what I want to have happen. Once you've had the conversation, and especially once it's in writing, I think it really helps protect your spouse from being a victim of somebody who may not have her best interest at heart.
Boy, there's a lot of people out there, and I think we can talk about that in a few minutes, and when a death occurs and when the sharks come calling. Yeah. And there's so many people, and they're vulnerable emotionally. Gosh, I can't stand people like that, because they're the worst. They don't care as long as they get your money. And I think we'll talk about that in a minute. But the third question, the very good points there. What things will different team members help with? You talked about the attorney, but there's other members of the team too. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I learned when my dad passed away was how valuable the funeral home director was. Not only making the plans. I mean, my mom and dad had talked about what they wanted, but the really good funeral home director said, okay, this is what your dad talked about. Do y'all have anything that you want to do differently? It was all laid out. We're very fortunate here in Albuquerque, I think, that most of our funeral home directors are very special people who have helped generations of every family. But one of the things they do is they help you write the obituary and get it in the paper. Unfortunately, that costs money. That's something you need to be aware of, is putting an obituary in the paper. Let's say that you're on Social Security. They take care of notifying Social Security for you, so you don't have to troop down to the Social Security office and wait. They take care of that for you. The most important thing logistically that the funeral home director does is get you the copies of the the death certificate that you need for all these other things that are going to come up. And believe me, always get more than you think you're going to need, because there's going to be somebody down the line that needs a death certificate.
Right.
And you don't want to have to pay again to get it, even though you can. It's not that hard. One of the things that's always a fear, I think, in planning a funeral is that unfortunately there have been examples of people who are rather unscrupulous. This is one of those things nobody should ever try to take care of on their own. Take your kids, take a good friend. One, it helps protect you, but also one of the things a widow needs at this time in her life is a second pair of eyes and ears. Because you're hearing what's being said, but are you really taking it in? Because there is, again, we've talked about before, so much. So it's like, have somebody with you. Have somebody look over the paperwork with you. Listen to it. Have them read the obituaries. Is this really what we wanted to say about Jack? Is this real? And just have somebody with you at all times to help you.
I think one of the things that you mentioned that's important is a lot of times, are you taking it in? That's important, because I think when the event happens, again, you're going through so many things in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You can't believe that it happened. Death's inevitable for everybody, but you can't believe in some cases that it has happened to your spouse or to a loved one. And you got the weight of the world on your shoulders. The family's looking at you. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to do this, and this? And maybe, like you said, that's what we're doing the show.
Yeah.
If you have your affairs in order, it makes it that much easier. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen anyway.
Yeah.
And if you can have a plan, like you have plans for other things, nobody looks forward to it. My mom used to say things to me, I wouldn't even listen.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I have to listen, because I'm the power of attorney. The other thing is, you talked about bankers and financial advisors or financial planners.
Mm-hmm.
What's their role on the team? How important are they?
Well, the bankers are really important, because almost everybody's got a checking and a savings account. People have got CDs. They've got this money. And in fact, I was just talking to my brother. He's settling a state up in Connecticut. And they have got one small checking account that was not joint. And somebody was telling them that he had to go to probate. That could have easily have been taken care of if, when his father-in-law first got sick, that they had sat down and talked to the banker and looked over all their accounts and said, okay, what happens when I pass away? So sit down and talk to your banker. Look at your account statements and say, okay, I've got this one little account over here that's just in my name. I need to put my wife on it as either a beneficiary or as a co-owner, because she may need access to this money, but why should I put her to having more things to do, little things to take care of?
Right.
Because, in New Mexico, well, it's anywhere, it's really easy that if on a married couple, if both people are on it, it is automatically joint with rights of survivorship, so that the money will go to the surviving spouse who's the signer on the account, just automatically. But you don't want to close that joint account first, because you can have a refund check come in from P&M 6 months down the road, and if you don't have an account with your husband's name on it, you can't cash the check.
Yeah,
and then you have to fight with them to get them to reissue it, which is a whole nother issue.
Yeah,
and I've seen that a lot of times. Another thing is that, did you have a debit card on the account? Well, that debit card needs to be closed. Did your husband have a credit card in his own name? If that was just strictly his credit, that needs to be closed, and those things need to be taken care of immediately.
The other thing was, I know you wanted to talk about financial advisor, financial planner. You wanted to mention those, again, very important members of this team.
Yeah, financial advisors are the financial planners. We're the ones doing the investments. We have the life insurance, the annuities. We may have the IRAs, all these other things that are outside of the bank. And hopefully, again, when you're doing your pre-planning, you've sat down with all these people and you've looked at your beneficiaries. You know who's beneficiaries of the IRA, or who else on the life insurance, who's on the annuity. Because those named people will override whatever is in the will. So if your IRA still says that your ex-wife is the beneficiary, she's going to get the money, even though you might have been divorced from her for 25 years. And I have seen that happen.
So again, they didn't take care of...
They didn't take care of it. So again, it's part of the pre-planning. You sit down with your life insurance agent, your investment professional, and say, okay, I want to make sure that my current wife is the beneficiary on everything I have. And don't rely on us to keep the records, because I worked for a former firm that all their records were housed in World Trade Center 7. So when that building burned on 9/11, all our records were lost.
What kind of chaos did that cause?
Oh, well, it kept me busy for several years. In fact, they were still working on it when I left there 4 years ago. So, you got to take care of yourself.
Of course, Beverly, you would never expect something like that to occur anyway. I mean, it would never happen again in a million years, but just a point to say that, yes.
And all it takes really is a phone call. Call up your advisor and say, I just want to make sure that my beneficiaries are like this, that it's going to go first to my wife and then to my kids, or whatever the thing is. Just make sure. Now, one of the things we want to be really leery of is, again, unfortunately, there are unscrupulous people in this world. And a lot of people are going to be after this inheritance you have left for your wife. They want to make money off of it. There is absolutely no reason for a new widow to be in any hurry to change any investments. Once everything has settled and she knows more about what her new life is going to be like, then she can sit down with a professional and make decisions. I don't care what anybody may tell you in those first few weeks that they say, oh, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. No, you don't. Do not make any decisions. Don't give any money away. Don't make any big investment changes, because you don't know yet what you're going to need. And some of the changes that people may suggest could have really bad tax consequences for you.
That's another important, go ahead and, I saw this tax advisor.
Taxes.
Another member of the team here.
A tax advisor, it's like, are you paying quarterly estimated taxes? How much do you owe? Are you paying on an old bill? How much are you paying monthly? All of these things, because there's usually only one person in the family that's taking care of all of this. And and how do you communicate all this? You write it down. I know, I've met many, many husbands over the years that they just have a spiral notebook, but they have gotten everything written down. It's like, here's my tax guy, here's his phone number, and I'm paying, my quarterly estimated taxes are $400 paid on the 15th of, July, October, whatever the schedule is, I forget. And but just have this written down in some place that's easy to get to.
That's another thing too. I think this is a quick story, but this happened. We had to move my mother to a home, but in the interim, we had lost the will. We found it, but I think it's important for people to say, hey, lock in a safe deposit box. That's what we did. Have a place, like you said, spiral notebook, but know where it's at.
And tell somebody where to communicate. I mean, I pay all my bills online. Where are my passwords? So I have that in my equivalent of the spiral notebook. Here's my sign-on, for my bank account. Here's my sign-on for my investment accounts. Because, again, only one person's usually dealing with this. What bills do you have on auto pay?
The other thing is, too, and, we're going to get on with these questions. There's one more member of the team that we have to talk about. But the other thing is, too, Beverly, is when you're making these plans, you're living, you're still alive. So the last thing people are really worried about, even when you're telling them where it's at, they're not tuned in. They're not. So it's probably better to have somewhere that they can access the information, a file or something. Because when you're telling them, they're like looking at you like, yeah, okay, because we're both alive, we're living for the most part, So that's important too. Just the attitude, and it's not a bad one. But my mom told me that. I was like, yeah, sure, Mom. Now I have to pay attention to every little detail. So I think mindset's important in that too, and just letting people know where things can be found.
Well, and one of the things that I learned is that emergency personnel are trained to look on the refrigerator for information about an elderly person's health care if they get a call to the home. That works very well for everything else, is to have a note on your magnet on your refrigerator that says emergency contact information is in the safe or in the filing cabinet top drawer. Why not just have it right there where anybody can walk in, pull up the spiral notebook that says, the first person you need to call is my son Joe at this number. That makes it so easy.
Boy, it sure does.
And we're talking about dying, we're talking about death here. But the same thing happens. We live in Albuquerque. We could walk out here in the middle of the street and all of a sudden we can't sign our names tomorrow.
No, it's very true.
And so this applies to everybody.
It's just death is one of those things that I think people just, they don't want to really, ignore. And they don't mean to. They love us and they want to have our best interest. But that's the last thing you want to think about is loved one. But it's inevitable. Death and taxes, right?
And you don't want your loved ones cursing you out every day because they're having to struggle with all of this.
And so, you're absolutely right about that. The last member of the team, Beverly, the insurance agent, how important is he?
Again, talking about life
or
insurance.
She, could be either one.
Yeah, life insurance claims. One thing is file for the benefits as soon as you get the death certificate, because some insurance companies are very quick, others are notoriously slow. But you want to go ahead and just file for the benefit, get it as soon as you can. Now, one of the things that was in the news here 2 or 3 years ago was that the life insurance companies wanted to keep your proceeds and give you a check to access your money. What we found out was that those accounts were not insured or FDIC insured or guaranteed by anything. So if your life insurance company offers you that, just say, no, thank you very much. Send me the check or wire the money to my bank account. I want it right here in my hot little hands where it's insured and I can get to it if I need it. There's no reason for them to keep the money.
Boy, there's so many little things about, I think that people would have thinking their details are taken care of, but you're mentioning some other small things that could become huge if you're not ready, you don't have a plan in place. Now, let's go to number 4, Beverly. That was some great explanation about, there's still some other members of the team here that we must talk about. You talked about all the financial and legal people, and a lot of people, you mentioned unscrupulous people, and some of these people are in the field. Some of them, there's some great ones and some honest ones, and you just have to be very careful, like you said, have someone watch things and look over because they're in a state of shock, and have someone just be another pair of fresh eyes on the situation. The other people, who else needs to be on this team? You mentioned these other people, but now we're talking about some.
Well, I think everybody needs to have a friend that they really trust. May not even be a family member, could be. But you need somebody that you feel really comfortable about asking, I don't know what to do about this. Or I got this letter in the mail. What do you think this means? Because I think sometimes it's easy to be afraid to ask for help, especially for a couple that's been very close, and the widow is very much used to just asking her husband for help. It's going to be hard to transfer that loyalty, but you need to be able to talk to somebody and say, I don't understand this, or will you look over this for me, or what do you think I should do about that? And you can get that from just somebody you already know, or it may be that you need to join a grief counseling group where you can meet with other widows. There are things that, that people experience grief differently, but from the psychologists I've talked to, I understand everybody pretty much goes through the same steps, just at a different speed.
Right.
But if you've got somebody that you can talk to, which is often offered through some of the local funeral homes, is if you've got somebody that you can say, I'm not sure what to do about this, then ask them. And don't be afraid to ask. And one of the things that I do in my business is I am always available to answer questions. Somebody doesn't have to be a client of mine. If they want to call me at the 856-9237 and just ask a question, it doesn't cost anything to do that. That's what I'm here for.
Boy, that's a free number there, and for free advice. And one of the things that I'm reading here, and I'm sorry I was reading ahead here, but you mentioned, I think sometimes people come into money unexpectedly through the sale of pensions, things that they normally didn't have this kind of cash available, and it's in the bank now. And you say, don't make loans, don't change things. In other words, people go out there and they think they're flush with cash, and they are.
Yeah.
But save it. What do you say? Can you explain a little bit about? You say don't loan, don't loan money. I mean, you can, but explain that.
Well, one of the things that I unfortunately have seen is where, unfortunately, children and grandchildren have taken money from their parents or grandparents and left them destitute. After 20 years in banking, I have seen that. One of the things that I'm really excited that the paper is now doing their Scam of the Week article. And there was an article a couple of weeks ago about the lost grandchild that calls up claiming they're in some foreign country and they need money wired.
Right.
Because they're in trouble. There are always going to be people who are after a widow's money. I mean, that's just where there's money, there's greed, there's crooks. That's one of the given things of life. And so, again, have somebody to rely on to say, wait a minute, is this really right? And, thinking about long term, like you said, your mother had to move into a home. My mother is now in a home. So the budget that we quote unquote made up when she was living in her paid for house got thrown out the window when she had to go into assisted living. And you may need that money. You may not think you need it now, but once you move into, you need assistance in your home or you need formal assisted living, that's going to take up a lot of money.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Beverly, we've got about a minute left here. Wrap this. Why is this important? Why, you mentioned it. We've hit on some things here. Sum it all up for us.
Well, I think the reason it's important is that you don't want your family to think ugly thoughts about you after you're gone. Make it easy on them. Have some ideas. Have a plan. The plan may blow up, but at least if you start out with 7 or 8 people on your team, you know who to call, you know how to contact, it's going to be a lot easier on everybody.
No question about it. Beverly Bailey, Chamisa Financial, LPL Financial Advisor. Thank you for joining us for preparing your spouse and family. Thanks so much for being our guest.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it very much.
You bet. For the Department of Senior Affairs, I'm Ed Nunez.